Howdy, howdy, fans of the 12th Man. Welcome back into the Above the Yell podcast. Thank you all for watching. If you like this content, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Guys, this is the biggest episode to date that I have done. We're 3 days away from the highly anticipated Lonestar Showdown between Texas A&M and the Texas Longhorns. It has been 4,748 days since the two have met on the gridiron. We have a jam-packed show for you guys, and I had to bring in reinforcements for it. So without further ado, please welcome a fan of the 12th Man in a different land, Mr. Lane Smith. Let's do it.
That intro, thank you so much for the intro. That gave me chills. I'm really excited for this game. Thanks for having me on, Pebs. Love the show. Yeah, excited is an understatement, I think, for anybody that's a true fan of college football and how long we've waited to see this matchup. And frankly, could not have come at a better time, to be honest with you. Like, the fate of the universe is on the line. And, when I was on the show last, we were talking about that's what we want. We want to see that no matter if it's, a top 10, top 5 matchup. Obviously, A&M slipped a little bit. We'll talk about that. But, yeah, the season just flew by. Not that I think anybody was just like waiting for this game in that sense. Like, obviously we've enjoyed the season, especially as A&M faithful. It's been a really fun season, but this one was always circled, if that makes sense. This one was always circled. So I'm excited to be here. Like you said, we have plenty to talk about. So let's do it.
Yeah, I can't believe it's already here. It feels like just the other day that the announcement came out that Texas and OU were joining the conference, and, the reaction that everybody gave to that was interesting for sure. But man, it's gone by fast, and now we're already here, ready on the, like I said, 3 days away from this game. We will dive fully into that, but first, let's do a little recap of Auburn. One point I wanted to discuss was just the abysmal slow starts on defense.
Okay.
And how that's looked over the last 3 conference games, including the one over LSU, which they ended up winning. One over LSU, South Carolina on the road, and as well as Auburn on the road. They allowed South Carolina, going back to that South Carolina game, they allowed them to go 14. They allowed them to go up 14-0, and then they let Auburn go up 21-0. And it's certainly concerning. And then on LSU, they let them go up 10-0. Between those 3 conference games, you combine all those points, and A&M found themselves in a hole 45-0. And it's weird seeing the defense start so slow. And in the South Carolina, and I believe in all 3, they started on defense first. I believe they won the toss against South Carolina and Auburn, and then chose to take the ball in the second half. And I think that has to, if there's any chance of having success going forward, they have to change it pretty quickly. Yeah, just unacceptable, I think. And I think that's a large reason that the last 2 conference games between South Carolina and Auburn have gone the way they've gone. But credit to the offense, clawing their way back into each of those games. In fact, tying it up and taking a lead at one point.
Yeah, and like you said, I guess just to start on the Auburn game, I mean, I don't think anyone can ever predict 4 overtimes. Maybe the A&M, the 12th man can, just because it hasn't been that long since we saw a 7 overtime game with this program. But, going into this game, I really thought, having watched some Auburn's games this year, you figured it was going to be tough, but not this kind of tough. You thought it was going to be, I guess what I'm trying to say is when I'm gathering my thoughts here is this game really threw me for a whirl of where A&M is at. Progress wise, not only with their defense, but the program. Like, this kind of was like a whoa, slow down here, because I think the South Carolina game, and not that you want to be losing games when you're in a tight race in the most powerful conference in college football, but it was like okay, like I kind of get it from an outsider's perspective. Like Lenora Sellers, that running back they had, my apologies, I'm forgetting his name, but Lenora Sellers, the quarterback, and then the running back, just mauled the A&M defense. Like, they got out physical, they got hit in the mouth, they didn't respond very well. South Carolina is a very underrated place as far as like having to go there and play a game. It's very difficult. I mean, everywhere in the SEC is difficult, right? But I think trap game is kind of a term that fans get a little too carried away with. But to me, that had trap game written all over it. But then coming into this Auburn game, it's like, okay, like they've gotten manhandled a little bit by some SEC teams, but I don't expect them to like give up 43 points. And then you look at like just just raw receiving numbers. I mean, Cam Coleman, who originally was an A&M recruit, if I remember correctly, true freshman, 7 catches for 128 yards, 2 touchdowns, a long of 63. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith had 2 catches for 104 yards, a long of 60. They gave up explosive play after explosive play, and we had really gone into this, second half of the season thinking, like, specifically with Will Lee, the blanket, our favorite player, that, hey, this secondary is the biggest improvement on the team, maybe outside of quarterback. That's kind of up for debate still, I think. But just an unbelievable shell shock. And I don't want to say like it derailed the season or anything, because it's year one under Mike Elko. I still think they're playing with house money. That hasn't changed for me. But you give up just explosive play after explosive play. Peyton Thorne looks like what he was originally advertised to be about 5 millennia ago in college football.
Yeah.
300 yards on 19 completions. They did pick him once. But then you take all of that, Weston, and then you add in Jarquez Hunter's 28 carries for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, granted, I know that those attempts are a little bit higher because they did go into 4 overtimes, so it's skewed a little bit. But I'll be the negative guy here and just say, like, the total defensive nightmare. I mean, they not only did they get kind of manhandled in the run game, like they were getting gash and gash and gash, but they also gave up plays over the top. And it was like, okay, I mean, at least South Carolina wasn't beating them that way. Like, okay, like, you go into this game saying, well, at least, the secondary is not going to give up a big play, and they gave up a lot of big plays. So that's all to say that this game just like has really made me take a step back and reassess who this team is.
Yeah, me too. Going back to, so actually, did you notice that Will Lee, the blanket, didn't actually end up playing on Saturday? He wasn't on the field
on Saturday. He had
against Auburn.
He had 2 tackles, I believe.
Did he? Maybe he started the game, but he didn't come back.
Yeah,
he got injured.
He exited early. I guess, and just for the listeners' clarification, talking about the South Carolina game too, I think that like him in particular, I've been kind of waiting for another splash play from him, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, is like, I think he's a great player and he has the bravado and kind of just all the makeup that you need to be a great corner. The last time I was on the show, I was proposing for him to be all SEC, but I mean, he goes out of the game.
Yeah.
And you can tell. It just makes you, and again, going back to the reassessment thing about like, how good is this secondary? How good is this defense? And Mike Elko, obviously defensive background. He's supposed to be this defensive guy. And it's just, I have more questions than answers right now about just coming off of that game.
Yeah. And Cam Coleman, going back to his recruitment, he was committed to A&M until then they fired Jimbo and he flipped his commitment to Auburn.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting development there. And he has turned out to be kind of a superstar for Auburn, as advertised. But yeah, super concerning. The interesting note is the loss to Auburn and in the loss to South Carolina, A&M got outrushed by both of those teams. When A&M has gotten outrushed this season, including the game against Notre Dame, they've lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed like the game plan on Saturday was to stop Hunter, because I think they knew that he was, an all SEC back, and it seemed like that's what they were kind of forcing Peyton Thorne to win it with his arm, and really that's kind of what he did. And I thought, I texted you, I turned it off when they went up 21-0 because that was just pitiful and ugly, and I didn't think they would claw their way back into it. But once they did claw their way back into it, I ended up turning it back on. And I feel like there were opportunities, especially in that second half, for them to take the game. The defense specifically kind of seemed like they adjusted and settled in a little bit better in the second half. They got some good stops. A&M actually ended up going up 31-28, and it felt like it was going to kind of break open, or maybe they would take a 10-point lead here soon, and it just never really happened. We got a little stagnant on offense, couldn't put drives together like we initially did coming out of halftime. And then, yeah, it just ended up getting into, and then the clock management, I know you said it the other night, but the clock management there inside the
Oh my
last 2
goodness.
minutes was awful, and they allowed Auburn to march down the field and kick a field goal to tie it up 31-31. So, that was just pitiful, but yeah, super I think the most concerning is the defense for sure, and I think that's gonna be what I kinda hit home on tonight is, man, just they're supposed to be really talented, and I think they are really talented, especially their front seven. But yeah, that on the back end and their secondary, they've certainly struggled over the last several games. Really, it started against LSU because LSU was just tearing them up in the first half, and then the second half was much better. But then South Carolina kind of did the same thing. Lenore Sellers, who was not necessarily known for his passing abilities, once again looked like a really, really good quarterback. And then Peyton Thorne, same thing with Auburn, not not a not known for doing amazing things with his arm, but man, he looked amazing Saturday night. And I feel like A&M always has that issue. They always seem to make, not to, I don't want to diss on the quarterbacks. I think, I think they're decent, but they always seem to make these mediocre quarterbacks look really, really good.
Well,
And go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt, but to go off to your point, like, no, I don't think that there's anything wrong with calling Peyton Thorne mediocre. And you and I have kind of talked about this off air. Um, Honestly, I think Michael Penix, and I guess maybe if Bo Nix really pans out as a pro, which it kind of looks like he's starting to, not that's a different conversation. But besides Michael Penix and Bo Nix, like, how many of these like fifth, sixth, seventh year quarterbacks are good? There's a reason that they're still in college, to be honest with you. That's my take on it. That can be left up to just being my opinion or whatnot, but there's a
Yep.
reason Peyton Thorne has bounced around and stuff like that. Like, I remember he was playing at Michigan State in 2022 against Michael Penix, who is a really old rookie in the NFL now.
Hmm.
And just there's nothing really about him. Like, I guess he had the raw talent and tools, or you could maybe say like Michigan State's like a Big Ten program where quarterbacks aren't built to thrive or whatever. But up until this point, like, going into this game, I would have not batted an eye at it. I wouldn't have flinched at Peyton Thorne killing you with these busted coverages over the top. And maybe you can say that even so, like, do you put it more on Peyton Thorne being phenomenal, or do you put it on the defense blowing coverage after coverage?
Defense, yeah. I think they let too much get behind them.
That would be my take. Like, again, credit to Peyton Thorne, 19 to 31, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick, but at the same time, like, he still doesn't move the needle for me. Like, Auburn's a 5-6 team. That was their second conference win, and again, we know the SEC is so tough, but I put this one.
And
I put this one more on the A&M defense of, like, I don't know if it was just a phenomenal game plan by Auburn's staff where A&M's secondary looked so lost out there a couple times, allowing, again, 43 points in 4 overtimes. Granted, there were the 4 overtimes, so 43, not 43 regulation points. Then we really would have been sounding the alarm there. But yeah, I just not the way I expected him to lose. The South Carolina game, it's like, okay, like, if they play against a physical team, they're in trouble. But
mhm.
again, a couple of those throws, Peyton Thorne, they weren't necessarily hard throws to make. Like, there was no one within Lambert Smith or Coleman on a couple of them. So
And I feel like historically A&M has always struggled in the secondary. That's kind of been just a common theme. They're not known, you know, they're not known as DBU
yeah,
by any means.
that might be the school they're playing this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, they're not known for being really strong in that on that side on the defense, but and I feel like that was Auburn's kind of game plan. They just told Peyton Thorne, "Hey man, we just need you to make a couple of these nice deep throws to crack it open a little bit," and we got him. And it's exactly what he did. He did enough, and he did have the pick, and also there in the second half, once again, it felt like A&M could have taken it because it seemed like Thorne kind of cooled down a little bit and started making some arid throws, but just couldn't take it. It was there, but just couldn't.
Yeah, and on the flip side, just to like kind of swing it back positive, right? Like credit to A&M's offense for continuing to fight. Like this A&M team has not folded like some of those Jimbo teams would.
Yeah.
Not to throw another, stray at Jimbo, but again, you don't want to lose that game, and it's an inferior opponent, but also like there's been some great Alabama teams that have gone into Auburn and lost to some not so great Auburn teams just because Iron Bowl is the Iron Bowl. We know that, but again,
Yeah.
credit to Marcel Reed for not laying down. Amari Daniels, Noah Thomas had a fantastic game, which is what we've kind of been waiting for. We know they're the talents there, but the numbers haven't necessarily reflected like I think the talent level that he's at.
Yeah.
Specifically going back to that Miami game last year, like, whoa, this Noah Thomas cat, like they might have between him and Evan Stewart at the time, they might have two wide receiver ones, depending on how they play it. But yeah, Marcel Reed took some real positives in the second half, but again, like you were saying, the slow start kind of trickled over to the offense. It felt like at times where Marcel Reed was taking some bad sacks. There were some dumb penalties. He ends up 22 of 35, just under 300 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Again, if you want to throw the caveat of going to 4 overtimes in there, feel free. But God, this one just kind of got away from him. But at the end of the day, they were right in it at the very end, and they're going to a 5th overtime if one ball is caught.
Yeah, 21-0. That's not easy to climb your way back into, especially on the road. I think that I saw people kind of blaming our offensive coordinator. I just
Klein.
spaced. Yeah, Colin Klein. I saw them blaming him for this game, and I would strongly disagree. You just climbed out of a 21-0 hole and tied it up. And that's when, like I said, I turned the game off when it was 21-0. I was like, I'm not going to watch this. And then they climb back in it. So I turn it back on, and yeah, impressive stuff. I think Marcel finally seemed like he kind of had, to me, it was a breakout game for him.
In a way, yeah.
It was a really solid game for him, especially on the road. He also got 66 yards on the ground and accounted for 363 yards of offense just by himself.
Yeah.
So pretty impressive stuff for him or from him. So that was nice to see. And I think it was a big confidence builder too, especially when they need it. But yeah, going forward on the defense, I would agree that that's the biggest issue right now, it seems. And going forward, I don't necessarily have a solution. Obviously, just take stuff from what I see on the screen and go back to trying to keep everything in front of you. Don't let anything get behind you. And Cam Coleman, I think there was some miscommunication in coverage on a couple of those on that first, maybe second, whatever play it was where Coleman just kind of burned the guy. I think I think it was Mays. I think he thought he was getting help from the safety, but that didn't end up happening, and he just got cooked, and Coleman ran it in for a touchdown. But yeah, I think just try to keep everything in front, and I think I don't know where you're sitting, but we can maybe transition in the Texas game, or if you got more to add.
No, that's it. I'll just say, last thing on Colin Klein. Not an easy ask for him, especially switching between quarterbacks with what really feels like at this point 2 very different skill sets, and kind of, the old saying goes, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. And for a while, it was kind of starting to feel that way. Like Marcel Reed, obviously a fantastic and a dynamic athlete and a runner. Like, but can he develop as a true commanding passer? We saw some of that, and that was very encouraging for a true freshman. But again, going on your point of like blaming Klein is kind of crazy. Like getting down in a 21-0 hole, You're on the road in a very tough place to play. And that just, I mean, the defense just kind of like the DNs, the D line, they can just tee off or they know you're going to throw the ball if you're down 21-0 and the clock's ticking. Not necessarily
Mhm.
like, they had no time left, but, you're down 21-0, 3+ scores, could have gotten worse. You're not necessarily trying to establish the run there. You have to get back in the game because all of a sudden, there was things on the line in this game. We didn't really expect much of that, depending on who you were, I guess, for Texas A&M. But the urgency came there. Like they came into this game, the number 15 ranked team in the country, and because of what else transpired around college football, shout out to the Oklahoma Sooners. This next game is still the SEC West Championship. So, with that being said, yeah, let's talk about this just monumental showdown that is happening at Kyle Field on Saturday night, right after Thanksgiving, as it always is. It used to be on Thanksgiving a couple times, but I don't mind
Mhm.
it being on the Saturday after, personally, just because it kind of feels like any college football game gets overshadowed by the NFL's triple header. So I love that the college football games are still on Saturday because
Mm.
college football, it's like Saturday is college football. So
Yeah. It's going into that Auburn game, I know A&M basically had to win to if they wanted any hopes of making the SEC championship game. But yeah, like you said, thank you to the Oklahoma Sooners. Still open up. They still have life. It's kind of hard to believe. Where this would you say this is probably the biggest game in to me, it seems like the biggest game. It's definitely the biggest game in Kyle Field in my lifetime. I think I don't know about all time, but I would say in
it's
my
up there.
lifetime, it's the biggest.
It's up there. To me, it's number one and number two with the rematch against Alabama with Johnny Manziel would be the only other one that
Yeah.
really, in my opinion, comes close. I think in retrospect, the 2018 Clemson game was a big game, but again, that was when it was Jimbo Fisher's second game. No one really knew Texas A&M what they were going to be, for better or for worse, I guess. And Texas A&M wasn't even ranked in that game. College game day was there. I don't know where A&M faithful puts the Notre Dame game from this year, week 1, up there. I probably not too high, but to answer your question, yes, like this is at minimum number 2 in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's so much on the line. Like, the stakes are so high, and the winner of this game gets, a great reward, and all those games you mentioned, those are really good games,
Mhm.
and certainly had their own stakes, but and sitting here at the very end of the season, you still have life, and not only do you have life, but if you win, you go to the championship game, which is something A&M has not done
Ever.
since being in the SEC.
Yeah.
So,
Chills.
yeah,
Oof.
it is. Yeah, I didn't think this late in the season it would be possible, but you couldn't really ask it for any better because goodness gracious, they're renewing the rivalry for the first time in 13 years,
And I
and
think
yeah,
I just think what I think a lot of people get lost in, or maybe the national media gets lost in, is like there's no love lost between these programs, these fan bases, these donor bases, the alumni base, whatever whatever section of each fan base you want to call it. It feels like sometimes when the conference realignment stuff, and you kind of like lose sight of some of these more traditional rivalries, and like the hate dies down, the water isn't boiling as much, whatever analogy you want to use there. But this one in particular, Texas versus Texas A&M, feels like the hate has been like marinating, like building up like a volcano over time. Like, I mean, if you go on basically any social media platform, I'm thinking Twitter specifically, but it
mhm,
is for the last however many years, back and forth and back and forth. The hate, the hate, the hate. Like it's up there with Ohio State, Michigan. It's up there with Washington, Oregon, um, Ohio State, Penn State, as one-sided as that one has been. Um, Alabama, Georgia, like these, you could just look without looking at schedules or not watching any of the games and just going on social media or message boards or what have you. And you would think that these teams have been playing every year since 2011.
Mm-hmm.
In the state of Texas, like, this is the football capital, the American football capital, mind you, of the world. All the talent is going to be there. This is where the big, like, the state of Texas is football. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this
Yeah.
is this there's so much on the line, not only on the field but off the field, as far as like pride of the fan bases, the athletic departments. They're just there's no way for us, just the two of us, to be able to articulate just how much is on the line on
Yeah.
Saturday. And that is exactly what every college football fan should want. And the fact that A&M is here and they are playing a part in the stakes being so high for this game in year
Mm-hmm.
one of Mike Elko, like, okay, the Auburn game, bummer. The South Carolina game, bummer. Notre Dame game, bummer. Despite all that, in year one, this is a house money moment for this program. And I'm going to use that to segue into just kind of talking about this for a little bit, because we've been going back and forth on this a little bit about a little bit of what I'm sensing from you, and a little bit of the A&M fan base is an inferiority complex, to be honest with you. Not to play psychology, on your football podcast here, but
Sure.
talking about having these big games. College Game Day has been to Kyle Field a number of times in the last 6 years, and ... That's it. Like, the spectacle was big, the crowd showed up, and then the team stays in some of these games, but they have not found a way to get it done, whether it's Jimbo Fisher, Mike Elko thus far. Again, it's year one. Astoundingly successful year one, by the way. I don't think even if they lose this game, will change my opinion on that. Now that the actual fan base themselves, yeah, we'll see how they feel about that. But this is a massive opportunity for this young A&M program, young being relative of, is it different this time? And I know a lot of fans want to see that. Like, they've, under Jimbo Fisher, they were ranked in the top 10. They got up to the top 5 at one point. But again, in these big games, when it's time to show up to the Alabama game, when it's time to play with something on the line, play Clemson, play LSU, they've fallen flat. They had Notre Dame in their house at the beginning of the season. A top 10 team came into Kyle Field, and it's like, how are we? What is this program? And again, it's year one under Mike Elko, but you have to kind of feel for the fan base of, like, we're ready to take that next step. We know what it looks like. We see all these other teams doing it, and we just haven't been able to do it yet. Saturday night could change a lot in that regard.
Be a massive momentum shift, really a program changing moment if they're able to pull it off. Like you said, our identity really has been to fall flat or fall short in these games, especially when they're this big. So walking out with a win on Saturday night would be a massive shift on all levels across the program and the record books, history, pretty much you name it. And I like that you brought up College Game Day. The times that they've visited College Station have not been good for the Aggies' outcome at those games. Sitting at an abysmal, to say the least, 1-9 when College Game Day is in town. That is the worst in the country.
Yikes.
It's bad.
Yikes. So again, you can't blame the fan base for kind of like having this like inferiority complex of, oh no, it's a big game. Like, we're not up to the task. Like, we don't have the players. We don't have the coach. It's time to find out if we have the coach.
That inferiority complex has a name called Battered Aggie Syndrome.
BAS. I have heard. Shout out to Prop Joe Says on Twitter, Mr. String, one of my favorite Texas A&M Aggie Twitter follows, especially during the game. Very, very cynical, but a fun follow if you are not too emotionally invested. For A&M fans, I guess what I can say is a shared misery makes it a half misery. That's about the best I can say. But shout out to him. I am familiar with the battered Aggie syndrome just from watching the games with you and whatnot. But again, the more I think about it, and I think the alumni base and people like Kyle Umlang from Texas Twitter about how much they about how both fan bases just feed off the hate of one another. I wonder, I kind of wonder in this game, is this going to be a Johnny Manziel level shift as far as interest in the program? I mean, if they
Yeah.
beat Texas at home and the whole entire country is watching them, college game days there, Mike Elko year one. I'm going to throw out a hot take. I wouldn't be shocked if Mike Elko, like, they start talking contract extension if they get to the SEC championship.
Yeah.
Again, it's year one, but I
Hmm.
mean, Texas A&M has done that before. Like, and you wonder if the Jimbo Fisher thing wasn't reactionary in the moment. They didn't want him to leave to go to LSU, and at the time, it kind of made sense. And you look back, it's like, oh, that's a terrible contract. But I I just can't help but wonder if they're going to think that if they get to,
Yeah.
especially if they get to the SEC championship and like either win and have an automatic berth to the playoff, or just keep it close with Georgia, which before this Auburn game, I think that they could beat anybody, and
Yeah.
they can also lose to anybody, obviously. But the Auburn game has me thinking about that a little bit. So all that is to say that we like, I don't think anybody besides maybe a select few of the very, very top of the pyramids of this program, whether it's the athletic direction, the big oil donors, what have it, can really comprehend how much this game means. Like this, we're talking about like 19, 20-year-old kids playing for the fate of the universe as far as Texas, it feels like.
Yeah.
And that feels
Yeah.
like underselling it a little bit, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I don't think there's a way to describe it unless you are a part of one of these fan bases.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't, I don't yeah. There's no words that you can really use. Um, yeah, it does. It feels like, almost feels like you have two of the biggest brands in Texas. Well,
yeah.
the two biggest brands in football teams going head to head. And yeah, it's, to me, the word, I guess, that I keep going back to is just monumental.
Good
But
word.
the you brought up we've talked about the banter between A&M and Texas fans on Twitter, and
Yeah.
how pretty much ever since this rivalry, I wouldn't say really ended because I don't think it ever ended,
No.
but since they stopped playing on the field, how it seems the two fan bases have been comparing to each other all the time. Like, oh, we have this many top 25 wins this year. You have this many, just going back and forth and still using each other as measuring sticks.
Yep. That's a good way to put it.
And now they finally get to put it on the field. Like you said, all that built up energy, 13 years worth, and the rivalry's back, but really feels like it never really left.
No.
Um, but
Only
yeah,
the game itself left. The rivalry is, I mean, these two teams could never have played again, and the rivalry would still be there.
yeah, it's absolutely alive and well. I thought it was interesting because one of the most common thing I've seen between A&M and Texas fans is comparing our overall records over the past 12, 13 years or whatever. So I just did some research. Since the last time these two teams played, A&M, we'll start off with A&M. Overall, they are 97-54, and Texas is 90-62. So you're pretty much, yeah, I mean, you call it a slight edge, but pretty comparable.
Yeah.
Texas had some nice seasons in there. They also had some 5-7 seasons. A&M had some nice seasons in there, specifically the 2012, and the 13 season wasn't bad, but
2020 as well. Like, it was a shortened season, but would they go 9-1?
9-1, yeah, that gave
Yeah.
them a pretty significant boost.
Yeah.
And also all the 8-4 seasons. That's kind of the way this program has been defined, I would say, over the last decade, is like, oh, we're the 8-4 kind of program. Like, seems like we have a really, really hard time breaking through that 8-4 ceiling.
And a very hard, thick ceiling it is. And I think that's well said, because it kind of goes back to, it goes back to saying it's a turnkey program. Like, as much as we can say that, like, You have the resources. Maybe you have the coach now. Game days there, like you're getting all the national spotlight you could possibly
Mhm.
get, even for going 8-4 in the SEC. And obviously, the standard with the infrastructure that's in place at Texas A&M is way above 8-4. But on the flip side of that, like this Texas team, ever since not Tom Herman. Tom Herman was kind of the problem when Mac Brown, excuse me, left, who actually just got fired today as well. So happy trails to Mac Brown. Ever since Mac Brown left, I mean, they've been mediocre at best, and even really the
Mhm.
expectations haven't even been that high. Like them winning in 2016, like an overtime game against Notre Dame at DRK or DKR. Sorry, Texas fans. When they were unranked, and that was like the pinnacle of the 2010s for Texas. Like there's not really a lot to be proud of, to be honest with you. Like obviously Steve Sarkisian has kind of turned that around, and the same thing goes for them. Like any other year before 2022, you could talk about this Texas team and saying we have everything in place, we just need the right guy. Like
Hmm.
so, if there's proof in the pudding, it's this Texas team. Like
Yeah.
A&M could absolutely become this, but it's TBD. And like you said, like the 8-4 barrier, they just have to break through it. And
Yeah.
this is it. Of all teams, this is the perfect one to have to go through.
Yeah. And it couldn't be lined up more perfectly, really. The
No, it's
things
perfect.
that the thing that fell in the things that had to fall into place for this still have the chance at making the championship game. Yeah, it couldn't be any better. Or yeah, you can't ask for more dominoes to fall on your side. And I kind of got stuck in a yeah, I was really curious today. So I did a bunch of research and just got like some interesting fun facts because never really done a ton of research necessarily because I've never really had to. But now with this game on the horizon, I went back just to 1986. The rivalry did start in 1894, but I was not gonna go back and count um, all the one score games. But from 1986 to 2011, 9 of those games were within one score. A&M actually leads those one score games 6-3.
Good omen.
Yeah, 16 or since 1986, A&M has won 13. Texas has won 12. So A&M has a one game advantage over. And I know a lot of Texas fans will talk about the all-time record, which fair enough, whatever. Texas leads 76-37 overall. Um, I would be interested to see what struck my curiosity is I wanted to see how many of these games have been one score. Um, but like I said, I didn't go all the way back to 1894. I just went back to 1986. But so yeah, Texas has a pretty padded all-time lead over them, but these have, I think, more often than not, these games have been really close.
Yeah, and the last game that they played was really close, right? Like Justin Tucker was the kicker for the
Yeah,
Longhorns, and he kicked the
yeah,
game winner at the buzzer.
yeah,
Sorry for anyone that had to relive that, but
yeah,
yeah, no, this all I can say from a neutral perspective is I hope we get another game like that. And when we can get into the nitty gritty preview of it, but no,
mm,
this is as classic of a rivalry as it gets. I think a lot of people in the general audience, they kind of default to saying Ohio State, Michigan is the rivalry in college football, and fair. I think that's very fair to say, but this one's up there too, and a lot of people are gonna, a lot of younger folks might not really know, but a lot of OGs are gonna have their memories jogged big time on Saturday.
yeah. And I think as great as Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and Auburn, as good as those rivalries are, I think this Saturday the eyes are going to be on Texas. I think,
Absolutely,
yeah, I think Michigan having the year they're having, I don't think anybody's going to be terribly invested in that except maybe their fan base. But
yeah.
Auburn and Bama, I'd say there'd probably be a little bit more interest in that game than the Michigan Ohio State, but I think this one certainly takes the cake for Saturday. I think, yeah, all eyes are going to be on this game.
Which supplements what we were saying about these having the national spotlight. This is the game of the day, and this is the second or third time that Texas A&M has had the game of the day. You could argue that first Saturday, Notre Dame A&M was the game to watch.
Yep.
Yeah, again, like we we can talk forever about it. Like this is a monumental. I keep using the analogy fate of the universe on the line because it really does. Like there's so much on the line here.
Feels like that.
Bragging rights for a long time too. Like
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been a long time coming.
yeah. So I kind of want to transition into just looking at this Texas team and looking at the actual matchup on the field itself. Obviously, we've talked about everything surrounding what's going on the field, but with all that being said, I'm not moved by this Texas team.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to get your opinion on basically how does Texas win this game? Or, I mean, yeah, I want you to dive deeper into that, obviously, and explain too why you think you're not necessarily moved.
I just think that like with what Texas has put on the field all season, I'm like this is the number 3 team in the country. This is the presumed SEC champion. They've really played one good team. I mean, what's your definition of good, right? Like the SEC, again, we always say that every team's good, but I mean, they blew Oklahoma out. Good for them. Oklahoma hasn't been a very good team until they played last Saturday night, and they looked fantastic.
Yeah.
Barely scraped by Vanderbilt. Georgia pretty much handled them, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Carson Beck still threw 3 picks in that game too, I believe.
Yeah, Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions, and they won 30-15.
Yeah.
That's kind of the story of the season for Georgia. I understand that. But also, like the Kentucky game, like they pulled away late. Like that game was not a 31-14 game the whole time. Like that one was not in their control for forever. And you know what I really think is at the core of it is I think Steve Sarkisian is a great offensive mind in college football. I don't think he could take the leap to the NFL because we've actually talked about that this week. Some guys just don't translate. And I think even boiling it down from him, I would love to just take a peek inside his mind and go into those games, like the first half of the Kentucky game, the Georgia game. I mean, they won 20-10 against Arkansas, and Ewers didn't have 200. Ewers hasn't thrown for 200 yards since November 9th against Florida. They blew Florida out. I wonder if Sark really is just like, I should just do it. I should just play Arch Manning. He's the better player. I really, really want to know that because the number 3 team in the country, they're not short on talent by any means. I mean, you have Isaiah Bond, who's played at Alabama. He's played in the Iron Bowl. He's played in those big games.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic wide receiver. He has 5 touchdowns, and Matthew Golden, he has 8 touchdowns, not as many yards as Bond. He leads the conference in receiving touchdowns. Actually, whoa, that kind of took me by surprise. But I just like this for the number 3 team. I feel like maybe Texas fans could correct me, but it's waiting and waiting and waiting. Like, when is this team going to break out? When's the offense going to explode? Like, okay, they did against Florida, they did against Oklahoma, but I mean,
Hold on just a second. I think we lost your sound. Says you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah, you're good now.
Sorry about that. Quinn Ewers, basically what I'm trying to say is Quinn Ewers has not ascended into this elite All-American first overall draft pick that I think a lot of people expected him to, just because of his recruitment status. And like, it was a big deal when he flipped from Ohio State back home to Texas. And I just think about like he's played in some big games himself. He went to the college football playoff. He played against Washington, and that defense wasn't that great. But I think like, man, he really couldn't win him that game. Like, he was obviously the inferior quarterback in that game compared to Michael Penix, but really just I think about if they had like Arch Manning back there, that they would have won that game probably. I just like there's infrastructure there on their offense where like Ewers has all of the tools. He has the system, the play caller, the coaching, and Sark, and it just is like, is it a health thing? Is it talent thing. I think it's just a talent thing in decision making. Like Texas wins this game by coming out and hitting A&M in the mouth and scoring fast and kind of doing the same thing Auburn did. I mean, to put it in layman's terms, as far as like, we're going to put him in a hole deep. We're going to put him into obvious passing down situations. And Texas's defense has been pretty solid this year as well. They have the don't quote me on this. Let me pull this up really quick. They have the third ranked defense in the country. I was going to say, I knew it was top 5, but yeah, it's the number 3 ranked team in the country defensively. So you
once again
about that, they're going to be able to tee off on Marcel Reed. They're going to be able to really put these guys in a hole and beat up and just play a physical football game. If A&M is not careful, and I almost wonder, like, if you win the coin toss, like we talked about today, A&M might have to take that ball first and just try and get up.
I think you change it up, and I think you have to, because obviously starting on defense first has not done any good. I think if they win the toss, you take the ball, and I truly believe that. And yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, you're good.
Yeah, Texas defensively, I would echo what you said too. They're really good, really sound on defense. Anthony Hill, funny enough, another guy that he was originally committed to A&M, and then we had some transition at linebacker coach, and once that happened, actually I believe it happened when Mike Elko left for Duke, and then Elko brought the linebacker coach with him. So Anthony Hill dropped his commitment to A&M and then went to Texas. So he's been really good for their defense. They've got a really good secondary. I believe they have the guy from Washington, right? Muhammad. He played on the Washington Huskies last year.
He plays for the Ducks. He plays for Oregon.
That's right. Okay.
They almost had him, and you almost wonder, like, to play into that point, like, oh my, imagine if they had him. It's just really, they honestly, in credit to Sarkisian and that program for replenishing the defense after last year, because they lost Byron Murphy. He was a first-round pick for the Seahawks, absolute game wrecker. And then right next to Byron Murphy was Tavondre Sweat, third-round pick, and he's had a really solid rookie season for the Tennessee Titans. Like, they were loaded up front. Their front seven was crazy. The secondary was a suspect part, and that's why they pursued Jabbar Muhammad like they did, because, again, that got really exposed in the college football playoff. Michael Penix, Jalen Polk, Odunze, McMillan just shredded them to pieces. And I mean, whatever statistic you want to look at, how they've improved off that, this Texas defense, like they're top 10 in red zone defense, they're top 3 overall. Like, this is a really good defense. This is a really good defense. This is not the Auburn or South Carolina defense. This is going to be a real test. We're going to find out just how dynamic the offense can be with Marcel Reed and how deep Colin Klein's bag is. And also, again, I think the magic word for A&M fans for a while now, specifically comparing Jimbo and this new coaching staff, is adjustments. Colin Klein's going to have to do some adjusting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you look at this thing on paper, and it's not very balanced. I think Texas leans pretty heavy if you look at them statistically. Like you said, on defense, really, really good. Total defense, they're ranked second, which is pretty ridiculous.
Crazy.
And then on the flip side, offensively, like you said, I say this now, and it's probably going to come back to bite me on Saturday, but it doesn't see, at least the limited time that I've watched them, they love, I would say Sarkisian's kind of the king of the screen. He loves the way he's integrated and changed screen passes and done things like that. It's pretty interesting. But offensively, yeah, I don't know, still kind of a question mark over them. But still, despite that, they rank 15th in scoring offense. And in total offense, they're at 18, and A&M is at 44 in total offense. And then, I think looking at this thing on paper, it leans Texas. In
Yeah.
fact, the only thing that I think maybe A&M has an edge over is really just special teams.
Yeah, and
Um,
that might make the difference if it comes down to
yeah,
a grind out field position game. We always talk about A&M being punter U. They have a fantastic special teams unit. Um, Tyler White is an automatic inside the 20, it feels like. Randy Bond, he missed that field goal, which ended up costing him really dearly on last Saturday against Auburn. But yeah, I think that's very well said. Like, what's the clear advantage that you can take away from A&M and its special teams? And you know, the casual football fan might laugh at that, but that absolutely can make a difference in a close football game. And we literally saw it the last time A&M took the field. So don't count that out.
yeah. And Tyler White, speaking of him, did you see he had another 1-yard pin this
Yeah,
last weekend against Auburn?
yeah,
He's been so good.
and you think, and again, I'm playing what if and hypothetical. You pin this team deep, and you force Quinn Ewers to make a couple poor decisions.
Yeah,
There's an avalanche waiting to happen there. So it's just a matter of, can A&M dial up the right blitz? Can they get to Quinn Ewers with a 4-man rush and not blow their coverages on the back end? Like, that's kind of an all encapsulating way on the defensive side. It's like they can create turnovers off Quinn Ewers, and I think that's kind of
mhm,
the thing that I'm waiting to see, because um, legendary football coach Pete Carroll has always said that turnovers come in bunches once you're dialed into that level to where you can get turnovers. So that's just swarming to the ball, playing team defense, and getting to the quarterback, even with a 3 or 4-man rush. Turnovers start to come in bunches, and they've picked the opposing quarterback here and there. Peyton Thorne threw 1 interception. But we're waiting for a landslide, and no better time to have a landslide in this game. And I think against a very vulnerable quarterback, when you look at how good this Texas team is, we talked about how good their weapons are, their backup, how good their backup quarterback
yeah,
is, their coaching staff, their defense. What's their Achilles heel? I really have a hard time saying anything other than the quarterback. If it was
yeah,
Art, if I were a Texas fan, I would feel more confident winning this game if Arch Manning was playing. And I know how like casual and cliche that sounds, but I'm at the point where I don't have faith in Quinn Ewers. When I think about Quinn Ewers as like an NFL draft prospect, I'm like, that's the guy that might be leading my franchise, my favorite NFL team.
yeah,
I don't see that at all. And again, the quarterback class is really weak this year, I think, and he's a huge part of that. At first it was early in the college football season before he got injured and Arch came in. And it was like Quinn Ewers is a top 10 pick. Like, there's tools there to develop with. Now it's like him and Carson Beck. Like, do you want to take these guys in the second round? So just like, again, that's all to say that I think that there's a huge an opportunity to really attack Quinn Ewers and make him mess up, for lack of a better term.
yeah. And I think that sets up perfectly, because I would not be surprised if we saw Arch Manning come into this game.
Mm,
Um, especially if Quinn is struggling. I know he had an MRI or whatever this last weekend, so I don't know his health status, but if he's struggling like he was against Georgia, I think Sarkisian is certainly not afraid to pull him, and especially in this game when with the way this game is set up and what's on the line. So I guess my question would be: do you, if Quinn is struggling before half, can't really get anything going, A&M defense is, kind of leaving him no options, and let's say A&M is ahead by 1 score, do
okay.
you think Sarkisian considers putting in Arch in this
I,
game?
I think we'd have to have more context than 1 score. If it's a low scoring game, if we're talking like a 13-6 ugly field position type game,
Yeah,
I almost wonder, just because Arch Manning poses much more of a threat as a runner, and obviously he's no Marcel Reed or anything like that, but Quinn Ewers is just looking like a statue back there, and it's looking like he's unhealthy or injuries re-aggravating him. Like, Yeah, I at least think like Sark has to have like a package to put Arch
Yeah.
in again, even if it's just for like a read option and he takes it off the right end.
Yeah.
If they need that spark, they absolutely have it. But if it's a shootout, if we're talking like a, I don't know, if it's like 35-34 by the end of the third quarter, then there's no way that we see Arch Manning in this
Yeah.
game.
You just roll with Quinn.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid if this game gets into a shootout that Texas is going to take it. I think that's kind of the last thing that A&M wants is to get into a shootout. And I don't think A&M really has the ability to get into a shootout. I think with Marcel Reed, as good as he's been for the time that he's played, I don't think he's quite there yet. And we haven't seen our wide receivers get a ton of separation consistently. I don't know that necessarily changes against Texas with how good their defense is overall. But before, I kind of wanted to get into, how does A&M win this game? But first, I wanted to ask you, how do you think Texas wins this game if they want to win?
How does Texas win this game? Scheming up the right plays at the right time. When I think about Isaiah Bond breaking, like he's one of the fastest players in college football. He can get open. Quinn Ewers doesn't have to be dead accurate or throw a frozen rope to get him the ball and score, and he can be gone in a heartbeat. I just don't think that you want this Texas team to hang around in any means. They've kind of hung around, even though they're not the underdog in any of the games that they've played this year. You give them long enough, they are talented enough to really pull away really fast. I mean, we saw that in the Arkansas game, we saw that in the Kentucky game. It just, yeah, the way I see Texas winning this game is the way they've won all year. I don't think they have to do anything different than that. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah, like how many ones, like they edged out Vanderbilt, they edged out Arkansas and Kentucky. Like they do it that way. Quinn Ewers doesn't have to be perfect, but he has enough around him. They have a good, running back. They actually have really good running back depth, I would say. And that also goes back to like how many points can A&M score on this defense, on A&M, on Texas's defense, like absolutely elite defense. We talk about Quinn Ewers making a mistake, but A&M's trotting out a true freshman at quarterback that, again, we're still a little unsure about his throwing ability. We're talking about Marcel Reed, who is very volatile as far as his arm. Like I think Texas A&M has to take the ball first, and they have to find a way to run the ball because number 13th ranked rushing defense against Texas, and that's what A&M does best on offense right now. Like you have the 1-2 punch. You got, I mean, you could call it a three-headed monster with Amari Daniels, Marcel Reed. You could put in Terry Bussey and EJ Smith in there if you really want to. Bussey kind of being like the bruiser goal line situation running back like he was against Auburn. But I'm fascinated by this game more than anything to see how A&M scores points. Because as of right now, I think that's how Texas wins this game. Quinn Ewers doesn't make mistakes. They get, I say with air quotes, they get the A&M defense a couple times, like over the top with a blown coverage or just an explosive play to a guy like Isaiah Bond, who is an explosive player. Maybe not to the standard that he was expected to be coming into the season, but that big playability is still there. So kind of in the reverse way of how Texas A&M wins this game, Texas wins this game in the same way. Quinn, like I said, Quinn Ewers does not have to be fantastic. Marcel Reed makes a couple of mistakes. This defense is ridiculous, and if they can't run the ball and they become one-dimensional, that D line, the front seven pins their ears back, and they start to swarm Marcel Reed. Maybe he can, scramble and improvise a la Kyler Murray, Johnny Manziel, Russell Wilson, whoever, Lamar Jackson, whoever you want to compare there, RG3. But I find it really hard in my head to visualize a world where A&M scores more than 20 points.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's more than fair. Kind of, I guess that kind of opens it up. We can kind of digest or dissect rather dissect how does A&M win? How do they pull this upset and finally book their ticket to the SEC championship game?
A&M wins. A&M's gonna like if it's a 13-6 type of game. A&M wins
Yeah.
with the home crowd being electric, the special teams making the difference, hitting a couple medium to long distance field goals is going to be really important in this game because scoring in the red zone on this Texas top 10 Texas red zone defense is going to be a tough ask. There were kind of some signs of that in the Auburn game a little bit. I mean, take what you want out of the dropped pass in the fourth overtime, but every point's going to matter. Every blade of grass is going to matter. If they can just contain the explosive plays, keep everything in front of them. Again, 13-6, 16-10 type of game. I feel really good about where A&M is at. If they can just Marcel Reed can take one read option across midfield at the end of the game, slide down, burn the timeout, and kick the game-winning field goal, whatever you have it. But they don't want to get into a shootout, like you said, with this Texas team.
No, and I think I was interested to see how, what did Georgia do to beat Texas by double digits on their home turf, and so I kind of looked into it. It looks like really if you can just get pressure on Quinn Ewers,
Yeah.
He's not all that good.
No, and
Actually,
he's a statue in the pocket. That's where I think Arch Manning is. I mean, he's night and day a better player than Quinn Ewers, obviously, but
yeah,
yeah, he's a statue back there. We don't really know how healthy he actually is. I think there's a lot of speculation on that. No, one or two mistakes, like the pressure, he can't handle it, I guess is what I'm really trying to say. And I would feel really good if we got like a I don't know who's our guy that we're picking to click for in the sack. Is it Dalton Brooks? Is it Cassius Howell?
Nick Scorton.
Nick Scorton, who is obviously highly touted as an NFL prospect.
Yeah,
And they're gonna have Will Lee back. It's already been confirmed that they're expecting to have him back. So he's a huge help as far as just having that sticky coverage on a guy like Isaiah Bond or something like that. That's gonna really, really help out that front seven. And like you said, hopefully it helps Quinn Ewers make a few more mistakes. That being said, this Texas offensive line is also nothing to scoff at. They have two players, I believe, that are expected to be first-round picks. I believe it's their left tackle and their left guard. Don't quote me on that.
Kelvin Banks, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, a lot of they just. I can't believe how they just I thought that loss to Washington was going to break them.
Yeah,
I know that's not a very popular opinion. Maybe you could say I'm being biased in that aspect, but like they besides their skill positions, they're not as good at the skill positions. They don't have Xavier Worthy, AD Mitchell, Brooks. Those guys were really, really good players at Texas.
yeah.
They don't have that, but the way that they've reloaded on the defense and the offensive line is like genuinely impressive for a team that put out a lot of players into the NFL over the last couple of years.
And I remember when they hired Sarkisian, that's kind of what he wanted. He kind of just came out and said something to the effect that, hey, we're going to get some dudes on the offensive line, and that's where it starts. And he went out and got them, especially in these last couple of recruiting cycles since he's been in Austin. I want to go back to the Georgia film just for a minute. And so in that game, Texas actually allowed pressure on 25 of 58 dropbacks. They gave up 7 sacks, and Quinn during those only threw for 87 yards. Now, transitioning to the A&M defensive front, which I still believe is really good.
Mm-hmm.
They have gotten 194 pressures on the season. That's about 18 per game. So if A&M can get that number just over 20 for this game, I think they got a really good chance. I mean, 18 to just – I mean, you're at 18. Why can't you jump over, jump over the 20 mark and see what
Yeah.
happens, because that's what Georgia did. They got there 25 times, and Quinn was shaky for sure. And yeah, if A&M can get that number over 20, it could get really interesting and be really beneficial on their part as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go further into that, this box score, just looking at box score metrics for this Georgia Texas game when Texas was the number 1 team in the country. Yeah, 43 dropbacks, like you said, from Quinn Ewers. He completed 25 passes. Average completion, average yards per completion, 4.9. He was checking the ball down. He was throwing it quick. There weren't a
Yep.
lot of explosive plays. Isaiah Bond had 1 garbage time touchdown. He had 2 catches for 11 yards. Matthew Golden had 3 catches for 77. But like, I'm looking at Gunnar Helm, 6 for 62. Jaden Blue had 7 for 48. He was catching screens and checkdowns.
Yeah,
Like, again,
Helm is
this
a good
team is
tight.
beatable. This team is beatable.
Yeah.
If you keep everything in front of you, you have a really, really good chance of beating this team. Again,
Yeah.
Georgia's as a phenomenally talented team as well. So, take that with a grain of salt. But, Kentucky and Arkansas, like they were giving this Texas team a really hard time in very similar fashion.
Yeah, they were. And I can't help but think that the defensive coaching staff is studying that Georgia film pretty heavily, and seeing what they did to get home and disrupt some things for Texas offensively. Switching gears just a little bit to the A&M offense, kind of what do they need to do? And you mentioned it a little bit ago, kind of stick to what they've been doing, and that's run the ball. I think they need to do enough in the running game to simply maintain possession and kind of shorten the game. I think you gotta keep the offense out on the field in whatever way possible.
Yep.
Yeah, and just keep the Texas offense off the field. I think Marcel, he will have to make maybe a few big throws just to kind of keep them guessing still.
Keep them honest. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, like I said, can't get into a shootout. I think they got to start fast, and really lean on their bread and butter, and that's running the ball. And an interesting development is, have you heard of Reuben Owens?
I have.
He got injured during fall camp, I believe, a lower body
Right.
injury, been out. Something interesting was that for the Auburn game, the availability list came out, and he was listed as doubtful. And then as the Auburn game came around, found out that he was not going to be playing. Of course, that was a question that was asked in yesterday's press conference. Elko didn't really say much, kept it pretty bleak, was just like, yeah, we'll see how that goes. So that would be super interesting, and I think a lot of A&M fans would be very pleased to see him out on the field, because he was actually he was the proposed starter over Moss.
Yeah.
Which, how healthy he is, I don't really know, but if he trots out on that field and he's dressed out, you're gonna have, I think, a very electric fan base, especially when he gets his first handoff. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know how healthy he is, but he was listed as doubtful. Then he was listed to out. There's yet to be an injury report come out this week. I think they come out on maybe tomorrow. I think one comes out tomorrow and another one comes out on Friday.
I was going to say, I think it's Wednesday.
So we'll see. But man, it'd be good to get him back, especially for this game, and just to see what he brings to the offense. Because I mean, I've seen he played a significant amount last year, and he's really good. He's kind of a pretty stout little back. He's really fast, and I think he would certainly bring some much needed life into this offense, because as far as rushing goes, really ever since the LSU game, there hasn't been a lot. I mean, Amari Daniels played a pretty decent game against Auburn, aside from the drop, whatever. Don't fully put that on him. I don't think they should have been in that position in the first place. But anyways, I think Amari's still a really good back. But yeah, I mean, haven't really seen a lot of the Reed option um, with Marcel Reed ever since the LSU game, because you think about it, he came out and he just ran all over the field.
Yeah.
So I think they need to get him going again. He kind of started going against Auburn in the second half, but I think he's going to be important, especially with his legs.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And even just to pick up a couple third and whatever you have at third and 5, 3rd and 6, like Texas A&M is the 22nd ranked third down offense in the country, Texas being 30th. Like they've shown the ability in certain contexts to pick up the sticks and control the clock. And I think that's what it comes down to with using Marcel Reed's legs to keep the ball out of Texas's hands and control the time of possession. I know that's like an old school philosophy, but that's the way A&M is going to have to win this game.
yep, exactly. And something else I wanted to bring up, A&M offensively this season, you know where they sit in red zone scoring as far as ranking?
A&M's red zone scoring,
Yeah,
I'm going to guess, is it in the top 30?
it's in the top 5.
A&M's red zone scoring is.
Yep,
Wow, I did not know that. I was saying that they've struggled in the red zone. Wow.
they are second.
Yeah, oh yeah, they are. Wow. I'll be darned.
Second in red scoring offense.
Okay, so unprofessional of I didn't mean to come on your podcast and blatantly lie like that.
No,
But
no, that I was surprised too. I was scrolling through Twitter today, and people love putting stats out there, and I saw one, so I had to check for myself, and I was like, wow, actually ends up being true. In 2023, they were 101st in red scoring offense, or yeah, red zone scoring. Sorry,
yeah,
I don't know.
that's
know.
I think that just goes to a testament to one, an improved offensive line and just having like a 3-headed monster running back, maybe 4 now, depending on some health of certain players. But that to me screams if they get down into the red zone, they have to continue to finish. Like,
Yeah,
even though it kind of sounds contradictory to what I was saying earlier about like, oh, they just have to get in a field goal range and let the special teams do the trick. But they get down there and finish, and they pin their ears back on defense, and they force Quinn Ewers to drop back 50 times this game. Then
yeah,
what that does, I think, obviously, like, oh, well, that strategy wins them the game. Then that's how they win the game. But what I think that does for Elko's reputation, not locally, because I think he really has such a positive outlook, not a positive outlook. What am I image? His image is so positive right now. I think the fan base is bought in. But I mean, if they're pinning Quinn Ewers down deep in his own territory and having 80 yards to go every drive on special teams and just hitting him, low completion percentage, sub 50, again with 45 plus dropbacks. Man, Mike Elko is going to be talked about a lot on the college football media circuit come Monday morning going into the SEC championship. That is going to really, really swing things. Because I just don't think that like people see it as they should right now, because so much talk is on this 3-loss Alabama team. This should Georgia still get in? Should Bama? Should Tennessee? But like Texas A&M is, I guess in a way they've always been this way, but Texas A&M is one really good national TV performance from things really swinging big time for them. And that's how, and again, so that's all to say that that's how they do it. Make Quinn Ewers drop back, force him to make mistakes. He wants to throw interceptions. That goes back all the way to 2022, even really early in that season before he got hurt against Alabama. And people say that, oh, he played so well against Alabama. But you go back and watch that game, and you go watch their first game of the season, 2022, and then you go the 2023 season. He wants to throw picks. He wants to make mistakes. They just have to capitalize. They are absolutely there. This isn't a flawless like they're not playing CJ Stroud. They're not playing, name your great college quarterback, whoever you want to
say Penix.
They're not playing Michael Penix.
No.
They're not even playing Bo Nix, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. Like again, it goes back to saying the Achilles heel of this Texas team is Quinn Ewers, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think because he's like the face of the program, really. Like he's a very recognizable figure within college football. Like he's on the cover of the video game. He is the face of the number 3. They were the number 1 team in the country going into that Georgia game. But at the end of the day, like, you think if they had a different quarterback, you wonder if Arch Manning was the guy the whole season. And I'm sure that there's a number of reasons why he can't be the guy yet. Politics, specifically probably politics of like, you don't want to bench Quinn Ewers after everything you've been through with him, and he's still good enough to play, but that's another debate. All that's to say is Quinn Ewers will give you the game if you let him.
Yeah.
Period. I could talk in circles about it all day. I don't have faith in that guy.
Yeah. No, I know you've been pretty outspoken for sure, and I think there's been flashes of him being really good, but consistently, not so much, which I think is really hard. I think consistency as a whole in college football is extremely tough. But
yeah, in the SEC, yeah, and I think that goes back to, not to interrupt you or take your point and run with it, but we're waiting to see consistency from this A&M program. Period. It was up and down with Jimbo. They'd look good 1 week, they'd play well against Alabama, and then have a letdown against like Arkansas, or they've had a couple letdowns against Auburn. To be honest with you, like this isn't the first time this has happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the response is going to be interesting. I'm excited. Obviously nervous. One interesting thing is I didn't know this was the most expensive football game in history.
That doesn't surprise me one bit, and I don't really know how to feel about that. To be honest with you, again, that's a whole nother conversation. But we're talking about 4-figure prices for a single ticket.
Yeah, easy. The get-in price is $750, and the average paying price is about $1,100.
Which I think is absolutely insane, and not really in a cool way, but I guess that's kind of out of everyone's control. But that kind of goes to show you, I guess, and I don't want to spin it really positive for the folks that straight up can't afford to go to the game, because that's a real big bummer when football isn't accessible, especially in the epicenter of the sport in the state of Texas, right?
Yeah.
I look at it as like, people, like these two fan bases have been waiting for this, and like the price kind of reflects that in a way. Again, I don't want to make that sound like an acceptable or a cool thing, but there's a lot of people with money on both sides that are like, yeah, I'll pay whatever price to see A&M take down Texas, or I'll pay whatever price to go into Kyle Field and shut these guys up. They've been yapping about the SEC for the last decade plus. And again, that ties back to what we were saying at the beginning of the show. Like, the tensions are at an all-time high. This is like United States versus Russia in the Cold War. It's been a Cold War for 12 years, and now it's heating up again. So with all that being said, we're over an hour. And I don't know how long we can go, but
we're almost at an hour and a half. I imagine anybody listening by now are true faithful listeners.
Shout out to y'all.
Yeah.
To give you the Texas slang. So let's go here. Give me your final prediction, score of the game, and then we'll jump ahead. Can the winner of this game, no matter who it is, can they take out Georgia in the SEC championship, and why?
Man, I realistically, I want to pick Texas just because that's kind of the safe thing to do. But heck with playing it safe. I've been an A&M fan for this long. Why would I pick against them?
Why not?
Texas is certainly the safe pick. I won't sit here and I guess argue with somebody till I'm blue in the face that A&M is going to win, but I'm gonna roll with them. I'm gonna roll with the Aggies at home. I think I'm gonna go 24-21.
Okay.
Aggies.
Special teams making the difference.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, I think that's the advantage that A&M has over them. So why not roll with it? Yeah, give me 24-21. I think I think they're going to do just enough and score enough to get it done. And I think going in the SEC championship game, beating Georgia, I think it's Carson Beck again. I don't necessarily believe in Carson Beck. I also don't think the Georgia offense has the weapons that it had. Example, Brock Bowers, which he kind of held it down for Georgia for
Mhm.
the last couple seasons. But this year, I don't know that Georgia necessarily has that. And kind of like you, similar to Quinn Ewers, I don't necessarily have a lot of faith in Carson Beck. Georgia defensively, they're always usually pretty good on that side of the ball. In fact, they're usually elite. Um, but this Texas defense is also elite. If A&M can find a way to get past Texas, I think they can certainly do it and get past Georgia as well.
Okay, I'm going to go completely contrarian to you. I think Texas wins this game 24-10.
Oh wow,
I
okay,
think that the A&M offense just isn't quite there yet.
yep,
With this Texas defense, and that's not necessarily an indictment on them. Like Marcel Reed is a fun player; he's a true freshman.
yep,
This Texas defense is insane. Like they
mhm,
like the expectation, the standard for them this year has been to get to the college football playoff, to get to the final game of the season, the national championship
yep.
on that Monday night. That's been the expectation, not even the hope, the expectation all season long. With that being said, I think that Carson Beck has, with just that he started to bounce back a little bit. I think that he's played a lot better since he had that kind of mid season slump. I think Georgia beats them again in the SEC championship. Texas ends up making the college football playoff. I'm going to say that they go one and done without thinking about a bracket.
Okay, yeah,
Um, where does that leave? I'll end on where does that leave this Texas A&M program at 8-4 again? What I hope from the fan base is that they're not reactionary to looking at just the 8-4, because there were some pretty big first steps in Mike Elko's first season. The Missouri game, I think, was I wouldn't call it a flash in the pan, but it was a flash of like, this is what we can be. Whether Missouri is that great or not is up for debate. Again, that's another conversation, but
I think if we fall short in this Texas game, I think it's going to be really difficult to not be reactionary. I think
oh
for
yeah,
a little while, it's certainly going to be reactionary, myself included. It's going to be tough pill to swallow. Um, Once again, I know you said not to look at the 8-4, but falling back into that category of like, hey, this is how we're defined as a program. It feels we can't get past this ceiling. But with that being said, they have, the first thing that popped in my mind actually was when I reflect on this first season as Elko, is it's if we ended on 8-4, it would be eerily similar. Okay, I take that, maybe not eerily similar, but similar to Jimbo's first season. Jimbo's first season was fun.
yeah. I was
Um,
gonna say that was the most fun season of the Jimbo era. That was it.
yeah,
It peaked in its first season.
and they had the overtime thriller against Kentucky. Kentucky was good that year.
That was a
Uh,
great game.
that was a really good game. Of course, the 7 OT thriller against LSU. What else?
The Clemson game.
Clemson game was good. Yep, that was a really good game. So, and this season's been fun. It's had its moments of being fun, but I also think it's also been, I don't know, at least just this is just the way that I feel, but I had a lot of fun in that first season under Jimbo. This season has been fun, but not as much fun. I think there's been some more disappointing moments.
D- Do you think that is because the expectations kind of skyrocketed overnight?
Yeah, I mean, I
Like
think
again, they got put in like that big game week 1, but then all of a sudden they're
yeah,
like in the middle of the year they smoke Missouri, and now we're talking about a borderline top 10 team, and then we went into the season talking about like 8-4 is a huge improvement from Jimbo's 5-7 and him getting fired, and
yeah,
these mediocre teams not hitting their expectations. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about the last time like I said, the last time I was on this podcast before the South Carolina game, there was a lot of potential that Texas A&M versus Texas was like number 3 versus number 10, 9, or whatever you want to call it. So I just think that, like, I understand that it can be that part of it was frustrating, but I also think that from an objective point of view, we have to give Mike Elko grace. It's year 1. If we're talking about 8-4 in year 2, we can revisit that, but it just, like, the upward curve of the expectations got, I think, a little out of control. I don't think the A&M fan base, from what I've seen, has been too bad about, like, just overreacting to they let us down again. And I know battered Aggie syndrome plays a part in that, but it's year 1.
Yeah.
It's year 1.
Yeah, and I think ending on 8-4, you take it on the chin, you move forward, and I think you kind of, as a fan base, I think you follow Elko's demeanor with him being kind of a quieter guy. The program, ever since he's taken over, has been fairly quiet. There wasn't a lot of off-season noise. I think that carries over. I don't think there's a lot of off-season noise. I don't think there's going to be a lot of talk of, hey, let's hype up this Texas A&M football squad. Look what they have coming in. Look what they, look at their schedule. Because honestly, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but kind of hard not to when there's only one game left in the season, unless you go into postseason play. But looking into the next season, their schedule is by no means any easier. In fact, it's a lot harder than this season. So, 8-4 would, like you said, the expectations were kind of skewed early on because of the big win over Missouri and also the win over LSU. I feel like that's kind of when it hit its peak, was when they beat LSU.
It got, for lack of a better term, out of control. Not out of control, but you know what I mean? Like,
there
was no going back from the expectations. Like, anything after that was going to be a letdown.
Yeah, and I think initially people would be extremely disappointed, but upon reflection, it's like, okay, pretty good season, and just got to be happy that we did get to 8-4 in year 1. A lot of programs would probably kill to consistently go 8-4, but so just take it on the chin, move into the off season, or bowl game, I guess, whatever they pull, hopefully win that, but then go into the off season kind of quietly and just stick to your brand, I guess.
Stick to the script. I think, we talked about this last time. Jimbo Fisher obviously did a great job of marketing and selling the program, but I think they need another offseason of tight lips. Quietly go get a great recruiting class, like we know that they can. Dip your hand into the portal, throw some of that A&M money around.
Which Elko is good at. I mean, a lot of these guys on defense are portal guys.
Yeah, go do that again. You stack another solid offseason and you really start to help the program ascend. And we can revisit this next fall. But
and I think you keep the staff too. I think the staff they have in place is good, certainly. And
so I think it's a fine line. Like, if they lose this game, like I'm expecting them to and predicting them to, walk a fine line. Don't be reactionary, but don't forget it.
Yeah.
There's no reason to fire any. I mean, unless they get beat like 59-0, maybe they can reevaluate their staff and the direction that they're going. But I think they just, taking it on the chin is a great way to put it. Like, if they lose, take it on the chin and say, like, it's not a moral victory. I almost kind of feel like the big losses under Jimbo were a moral victory. Like, that first Clemson game was like, it's year 1. It was the second game. Look at all the fans. Look at all these recruits we got. Like, I think they leaned too far into like the moral victory part of it. And I don't think that Mike Elko is the type of guy to do that. And they need to let it light a fire under the entire program. Like, we're good, but we're not great. This is what we need to do to get to great. Texas looks more like a great team than we do. There's great teams in the SEC every year. How do we break into that so elusive upper echelon? How do we win 10 games? Because going 10-2 in the SEC, Now with the expanded playoff, I mean, you've seen the narratives on national TV how
Yep.
much they carry water for a 10 or a 10-2, 2 loss, whatever, 3 loss, even
Even
SEC.
3 loss, yeah.
Yeah. 9-3 and 8-4, there's a huge difference. Obviously, like 10-2 is kind of where you want to be in that consistently, obviously. But yeah, this whole weekend is going to say so much about the direction of the Texas A&M program. And me, as kind of an outsider, I'm really excited to just kind of see it unfold. We've been waiting for this for years, and no matter what, it's going to be a fun watch.
Yeah, man, I was pretty young when this game ended, so I'm excited.
Your audio cut out.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
I got you. You're good.
Oh, we're good?
Yep.
All right, cool. Kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah, seeing this game now, years later, and getting to be a part of it more than when the last time they played. I was pretty young. Well, we both were pretty young, but yeah, it's exciting, and it really could not be renewed in any better way. I got a funny little story. I don't know if I ever told you. Did I tell you about the interaction I had with a Texas Longhorn fan in Laramie?
I don't think so. No.
This was spring of 23. Spring of 2023, I was out at the gas station by Walmart in Laramie, the one that had cheap gas.
Yeah. Remember that. $1.89?
Yeah, super cheap.
Crazy.
Anyways, I was filling my truck up, and there was a truck across from me on the opposite pump. Older guy, I don't know, probably in his 70s, if I had to say 70s probably, and he's looking at the back of my truck. I had a A&M sticker on my back windshield, and he's looking, and I kind of like catch him looking, and he goes, "Hook 'em horns," and I go, "Gig 'em mags," and he spits towards my feet, like spits at me like right after I said "Gig 'em mags."
Classy.
And I was like, man. And I looked at the back of his truck. He had a Longhorn sticker and a Vietnam veteran sticker on the back.
He was an older guy?
Yeah, he was like in his 70s, I'd say. But yeah, I was like, I got in the truck. Gracie was with me. I got in the truck, and I was like, you wouldn't believe what just happened. And I told her about it, and I kind of thought about it, and I was like, man, that's the side of the rivalry that I missed. That those older guys, like he probably saw some mean, just crazy stuff, and like him, spitting towards my feet. He didn't spit on me, but he like spit towards me. It was like, that's kind of the gritty, like 1970s, 1980s, just nasty rivalry where you just absolutely hated each other. And yeah, it was interesting.
And the fact that it extended to Laramie, Wyoming, of all places, between you and this older gentleman that is like 2 generations removed from you, it says it all.
Yeah.
That encapsulates everything.
Yeah.
I can't wait for Saturday, man. That's the bread and butter of it. So programming note for the subscribers of Above the Yell, if you've made it this far, we thank you for your patronage. Are we expecting a post-game reaction show Saturday night after the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I'll have to. No matter what the outcome is, I'll have to get it off my chest.
Okay. Can't wait.
So, yeah. Well, thank you for joining for this special episode. Once again, all those who have faithfully listened this far into the podcast, thank you for doing it. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, please like and subscribe. If you know me personally, do not be afraid to message me. I always love talking balls. So thank you again, sir, for coming in. I always love talking ball with you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm also excited about this matchup as a football fan. How are you not excited about this matchup? This is the one, man. We've been waiting for it for a long time.
This is the pinnacle.
So again, yeah, thanks for having me on. Love talking ball.
Absolutely.
Great conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll be talking.
Absolutely. Yeah. For all the listeners out there, have a great holiday with the family, and horns down.
Horns down. Even though you picked Texas, I understand why, but horns down.
Yeah, I'm not rooting for those guys. Come on now.
Yeah, I know. All right, man. I will talk to you later.
All right. See ya. Thanks.
Gig 'em.
Gig 'em.
Thanks, guys, for watching, listening. Once again, watch for the reaction episode after this Saturday's game, and Giga Mags.